Hey friends, Powwow Phoenix here. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about a subject that you know is near and dear to my heart, witchcraft. We have to take kind of like powwowing has a lot of work involved that is anti-witchery, and by witchcraft it means like evil witchcraft, like witchcraft designed to harm your animals and crops and your land and people in general and waste away your health and such with. So we have to look like historically, what were they talking about? So historically, the quote unquote witch was someone like I think it was like in the Bible that says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." I think it's a poor Hebrew translation. I think it was something like a diviner or somebody who casts spells or whatever. But you found a lot of that within Christianity. Christianity has always had magic. Always. Since the beginning, Christianity has always had people who practice magic. So this was somebody who could divine the future. I've heard some people say that thou shalt not suffer a poisoner to live because death by poisoning, especially in medieval times, was very prevalent. Whichever, excuse me, whichever way you take it, the idea that it was a witch in the Bible is not correct. The Bible does not speak about witches in the sense that we understand them today. But during medieval times, a witch was someone who had made some sort of agreement with Satan, um, like a pact, a contract, in order to gain these like supernatural powers of seeing into the future, being able to divine the future, and then being able to like work spells. And over the years throughout Europe, especially in the period from like the 14th century to like the 18th century, a witch was someone who was empowered by the devil to do nefarious magic against their community. They were like an enemy of the community. Now, of course, we had things like the Inquisition, the witch trials, and all that's a bunch of bullshit. Those people are not like witches in any sense of the word, either good or ill. Um, but certainly they inspired a lot of fear in people, a lot of fear in very superstitious people. And by superstitious, I mean like uneducated people who didn't know anything. And the church really kind of like cashed in on that. So to make a long story even longer, I guess, or to make a long story even short, um, the Christian church really like cashed in on the idea of like fear of witches, people who sold their souls to the devil in exchange for nefarious powers, and they spoke out against these things. Um, Meanwhile, the church themselves, the people who were learning the church, were actually engaged in like ceremonial magical rituals to like raise demons and conjure angels and such with. In fact, in Paris, in like the maybe the 1400s, this like Parisian school, and back then, remember, schools were all like religious based. Um, Actually had to like create an edict or like a rule that says no, students cannot practice necromancy. Um, So anyway, what I'm getting to is as time moved on and we get to more towards the modern era, and we're talking in particular like 16, 17, 18, even early 1900s, the people still didn't know. They would blame like bouts of bad luck or bad crops or whatever sickness in their animals on witches. And unfortunately, during the probably around the 1800s and 1900s, we started seeing um, like magazine articles and newspaper articles and such about people who were accused of quote unquote hexerei. Hexerei being the German word for witchcraft. It didn't have a good meaning. It meant something nefarious. Um, Most of the time we look back on that and we just like kind of scoff, like, you know, they weren't witches. It was just like bad soil or just a bad planting year, or it's just a property dispute. You have to get back at your neighbors, so you accuse them of witchery. And that's all well and good. But now here we are in the modern day, and we have people who, millions of people who are they're claiming to reclaim the title of witchcraft, but witchcraft was never good. So they're actually repurposing the title. They're saying that it means something good. So they're, and I know a lot of these people, they're just kind of neo-pagans and they're making up this religion about goddesses and such, and like quote unquote historical things that never actually existed in history. It's sort of like a fantastical take on history, like Beast of Babylon kind of situation. Anyway, it works for them. They have this sort of fantasy version of what history was, and they're making a religion. They're calling themselves witches. Fine, whatever. But then there are actually people who are taking on the title of hexen, hexerei. And these words, these are German words for witches and witchcraft that never had a good meaning, and they're claiming these were somehow good. But hexerei throughout history were never good. So if they're repurposing the word, that they should say that we're repurposing it to mean something good, whereas they're saying, well, it was always good, which is the hexen were always good throughout history, but there's nothing to support that. There's nothing historical or academic to support that. So anyway, it's tricky in this day and age because there are people who call themselves like a witch, and they're just doing good stuff. I even learned all that Wicca stuff for years. I was learning it, and I thought that was fine, but that was right at the time. And I met a lot of people during those years that, even now I would think, oh, they're just good people. They're nice people. However, they have a really like screwed up version of history because they've been fed a lot of BS like in the 90s and early 2000s with like really bad academia through a lot of modern like new age publishers and such. So, but nevertheless, their intent is fine, even if their understanding is like effed up. But those who are claiming in Pennsylvania Dutch culture to be hexen, hexerei, descended from hexen, well, that never meant anything, nothing at all. So we have to be wary of those individuals. Like, I don't like the fact that that word hexerei is being claimed as something positive, unless the people say, like, I like the word, we're going to repurpose it to mean something good. We're going to separate ourselves from historical hexen. But they're, if they're not doing that, then they're associating themselves with something that had such a negative connotation. And while many of the stories prove to be just like false and paranoia, there are still some stories within Pennsylvania Dutch culture, actual hexen, who have sold their souls to the devil, who have like tormented their loved ones, tormented their communities in such way. And so we have to take that into consideration. So if somebody in this day and age is claiming, well, I'm a hexen, hexerei, well, I associate that with like the most evil of people in our community. And they're saying, well, that's not true. It was always a positive or a good thing. Well, there's no evidence of that at all. So just them saying that or making something up does not like change the fact that what they're saying is false. So anyway, just be careful what you label yourself as, because you can't just like choose a word and say, I like that word, I'm going to call myself that. Well, there are some repercussions to that. I mean, if somebody said, oh, like they were going to call themselves a Nazi, but it meant something good, like it's not true. Nobody understands that to be true. So anyway, witchcraft, tricky subject. I realize the word has been used for centuries to discredit people and defame them and such with, and that's terrible. I mean, the Christian church needs to own up to that. However, in this day and age, there are people who are claiming to be those things. They're embracing those titles, and they're doing nefarious work and such. So they're proving the historical definition is true while claiming to be the opposite of that. So anyway, that's kind of my talk on that. Like, it's always on my mind, this idea of like witchery and such, because I have some conflict because I know some people who claim to be a witch, don't care for the word, don't care for their repurposing of it because it never meant anything good. Um, but it's their life choice. But they have to understand that you have to distinguish yourself. You can't say, oh, I'm a witch and I'm practicing something that's been true for centuries. There's no evidence of that. So it's really important to get your history right. If you're going to do something, if you're going to claim to be something, um, at least acknowledge that historically it was bad, but in this day and age, it's different, and you have to kind of acknowledge that. Anyway, that's my rant. I'm just going on, but there we are. So you guys are doing well. Have a good night. God bless you guys. Love you. Talk again soon.